These testimonials are representative of my or our experiences, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare providers. Welcome to The Beautiful Bag. This is your host, Leanne Hayden, cancer survivor, and more importantly, Ostomy lifer. Each and every week, I'm going to be bringing a special guest or some inspiration for you and a few little stories along the way so that you can learn what life is like for us to be living in an ostomy and why we all think it's a beautiful bag. So listen in and let's get started.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's The Beautiful Bag podcast. My guest this week, Dave, is amazing. I was on vacation, and I think I brought this up on last week's. By the time you hear this, I think I brought him up in last week's conversation with Dr. Ivaturi. But I was in Austin, Texas, and I got the most amazing email through my website. So, guys, if you're listening to the podcast, you want to have a conversation, you want to say something, send me an email because I love to get them. And let me tell you, I got this email from this big burly guy in North Carolina talking to me and thanking me for this podcast and thanking all of you for your stories and for sharing your stories. Dave has, he's had bladder cancer. He had 2 different bladder cancer diagnoses within 6 months. Which left him in a urostomy in April. So he is new to the ostomy world and wants to share his story, and we definitely want to hear it. So Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And again, thank you so much for sending that email. Like I said a little while ago, when we were having this discussion, I was sitting there having lunch, and all of a sudden I start crying, and everybody's like, "You all right?" I'm like, this is happy tears. This is happy tears. So thank you so much for sending that email.
Yeah, we all need happy tears.
Yeah, only happy tears, only happy tears. So, Dave and I were talking, guys, a little while ago, and we were talking about, his diagnosis, what he's gone through. And Dave, I mean, this is new for you. I mean, this has just been since April. So why don't we walk down that story of, being diagnosed with bladder cancer, 2 different types within 6 months, and, you've had multiple surgeries. What was that like for you?
It was hard for me. I think it was probably a lot harder for my wife. It's when people say, we'll pray for you. I'd always be like, well, pray for my wife. Because when you're sitting out in the waiting room, that's the hardest part. That's the hardest time. For me, I'm asleep, so for me, it wasn't, I'm asleep. It is what it is. But it all started, I started having frequent urination probably about 1.5 years before April. So late 2020. And one day I counted, and it was like 25 times I went to the bathroom.
Wow.
And my thought was, gee, the next time I see my doctor, I should probably mention this. The thought never entered my mind going, maybe you should make an appointment. This is abnormal. It was just like, next time we see the doctor, I guess I should mention this. This is kind of weird. But what changed my mind is one day I saw blood in my urine, and I was in a public bathroom the first time, and I'm like, that's got a nice rosé color to it. I said, I'll look before I go again, which that day was, about every 10 minutes. And so when I went back in there, I saw just 2 droplets of blood. And I'm like, probably should call my doctor. That's definitely abnormal.
Right.
And I called them. They had me come over. We did a blood sample. They said, yeah, you got blood in your urine. It's probably a kidney stone. And I've worked in an emergency room before, and I've seen people with kidney stones. And I just looked at them and went, okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because you weren't doubled over in pain, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I felt fine. I'm like, and they're like, oh, it's kidney. I'm like, I don't think so. So I went and had my first CT. Everything was negative. So they sent me to my first urology appointment, which was the first part of February of 2021. So we're in the middle of COVID and everything else. And he said it's probably a bladder spasm. Wrote us some scripts for some medications, and said, just to be safe, let's do a cystoscopy. And I said, what's a cystoscopy? He said, well, we'll put a catheter with a camera in your bladder, and we'll take a look around and see if we see anything. And I'm like, okay. So that's what we scheduled. And so when they did my cystoscopy, the monitor was right where I could see it. And so to do a cystoscopy, if you don't know, they use your genitalia and go in that through that.
Right, which is definitely not comfortable, right?
It's a little uncomfortable. By the time you've had a few, you start feeling like a porn star. Every time you walk into the doctor's office, you feel like you should drop your pants. Right. So he stuck the catheter in there, and I go, hey, what's that little piece there that looks like a piece of broccoli? And it did. It looked like just like the very top of a broccoli stalk. And he goes, oh, we'll talk about that later. And I'm like, well, you've answered my question. Thank you. If you'd have told me something else, I'd have been like, oh, okay. So he finished, and he said, we need to do what they call a TURP. It's a transurethral resection of a bladder tumor. And so what they do is they go in with a biopsy catheter, and they'll biopsy the tumor. And then after they biopsy it, they go in with a larger catheter and do a resection and try to remove all the cancerous cells out of your bladder. Your bladder is just a thin muscle that holds liquid. And so it's really an art form for them to go in and scrape your bladder and get the tumor out and not puncture the bladder.
Wow.
You don't want to puncture it because then urine, of course, would flow into your body, but then also all those cancer cells would be free to flow out as well. Mm-hmm. So it is an art. So they scheduled me for my first one. And I should have known after the first one, it was going to be a tough road. We were riding home, and my wife goes, so what happened today? And you're totally paralyzed, intubated, everything with these procedures, because I didn't know, but your bladder is full of nerves wrapped all around the outside of it. So you have to be very sedated, and otherwise you probably will kick your doctor upside the head while he's in there. And I said, they biopsied and removed the tumor, I hope. And she goes, well, that's not exactly what happened. And I went, okay. What did happen? And she goes, well, they biopsied it. And I go, okay. And she goes, when they went to do the resection, they couldn't get the catheter in. So they didn't do that part. The option was to do what they call a cut down in the medical field, which means for me, it would have been slice open my penis and put the catheter in that way. Since we didn't discuss this ahead of time, he thought it would be best if we waited. So he stopped, which I kind of agreed with. That'd be something, any man that woke up would be like, whoa, wait a minute here. What did you do? So they put me on some medication and scheduled me out for 2 weeks. And then we met in between time with the doctor. And he confirmed that it was a high-grade papillary urothelial carcinoma. And he said, for the most part, 75% of people, we remove this. They do immune therapy. They come back for cystoscopies, and that's about the end of it. If you have to have a cancer, it's one of the better ones to get. because it's kind of low maintenance. Normally doesn't come back. And I'm like, okay.
And before we go any further, we were talking earlier, and you said 50% of the people that get this cancer is environment, and 50%.
No, that's
No.
for the
Okay.
next. That's for the next cancer.
Oh, geez. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Keep going then.
But I mean, tobacco use. If tobacco use is a big bladder cancer. In that regard, you're right. Tobacco is about 50% of all bladder cancers. So you are correct. I'm sorry.
No. That was no. And again, I forgot there was 2 different diagnoses. Okay, so let's back up. So now it's 2 weeks later.
We're going in for a second surgery. Between the medicine, I think they had a different cath. The first surgery was over at a surgery center, and the second one was at the hospital. And I think they had more equipment available. So the second surgery, they did the resection. Everybody was happy. We had good margins. I read the pathology report myself. It read very well. And the doctor was happy. I was happy. My wife was happy. And so they scheduled me for BCG treatments. BCG is immune therapy. It's kind of a cool concept. Apparently, our white blood cells don't always attack cancer cells like they're supposed to. So what they do is they put live TB spores in your bladder, and the TB spores attach to the cancer cells. Your white blood cells attack TB spores.
Oh, so that's just like the extra little buffer to tell your white blood cells to go do their job.
That's right. Yeah, it's just to kind of motivate them and get them to attack the cancer cells. And I'd already had one chemo after they did the TERP with the resection. They went in and they fill your bladder post with chemo. So you wake up and your bladder feels all hot and sore because it's been scraped and kicked and beat on, and then they fill it full of chemo. So this was just this is like the gold standard of what they do for bladder cancer is they do BCG treatments. And we did 6 of those, and everything went great. Again, it's a little uncomfortable. The hard part is you have to hold it in, I think, for an hour afterwards. So, yeah, they fill your bladder full and then tell you not to go, which if you're like most people, if you say you can't go to the bathroom, the first thing they want to do is
go to the bathroom.
And
all of a sudden, all you hear are water fountains everywhere.
Yeah, water fountains. And so I finally kind of figured out a little routine where I could just I'd sit really quiet and try not to move a whole lot. And normally I could make my hour, not by a lot, but I normally made it. So then we went back for our 3-month check and did another cystoscopy, and he put the camera in and we looked around, and of course they let me see the monitor, and I said, hey, that spot there where you did surgery looks wonky, because that's a medical term, wonky. And
and guys, by the way, Dave is in the medical field. So if you hear him saying, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well, like when you hear him say, like, I read my pathology report, like he understands a lot of this stuff because he is in the medical field. So him knowing wonky is a term is a real word.
Yeah, it's a real word. My doctor, of course, disagreed with me. He said it's just scar tissue. And he said it'd be super aggressive to go back in again. He goes, so, it's okay. And I'm like, all right, you're the urologist. I'm not. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn. So, we'll go with what you think. And we did another 3 rounds of BCG. And I went back for my 6 months, and we had a change of doctor. Not that I chose one. but my original doctor had taken an administrative position. So I had a different doctor. And before the procedure, I said, hey, a lot of my symptoms are coming back, and just wanted to let you know I had things don't feel quite right. And he's like, well, it's probably nothing. We'll do the scope and confirm. And I said, okay. And so he slid the scope in and literally was in 30 seconds, pulled it back out. He goes, yep, you're right. It's back.
Wow.
That's really what I didn't want to hear.
Yeah.
And so scheduled me for another surgery. So this is my third surgery from probably February to October. And this doctor was a lot more aggressive. Post procedure, I had a lot more passing of blood and a lot more pain. And the pathology report came back as small cell bladder cancer. And that's very rare. It's like less than 1% of all cancers. And I got this news right around my birthday. So it was like, hey, happy birthday to me.
Oh.
So when I got that result, I decided to go a self-referral to a cancer center.
Mm-hmm.
So if people don't know that you can self-refer yourself to a cancer center or another physician. I would highly recommend it. When I called and they said, well, who referred you? I said, me. And they were like, oh, okay. But they still got me right in, which surprised me. So about 2 weeks after we had the small cell diagnosis, we sat down with a new urologist who specialized in the weird, wild, and crazy urology cancers. And I had done some reading ahead of time, so I was afraid of what he was going to say, or kind of had an idea what he was going to say. And he sat down with me and my wife, and he looked at us both, and he said, this cancer will kill you. I'm sorry, but that's what's going to happen. He said, survivability at 5 years is 50%. If you do absolutely everything I suggest. And one of the studies I had read, I think if you didn't do anything, survivability was about 3% at 5 years. So I didn't really doubt his numbers. Mm-hmm. He wanted to do chemo and radiation concurrently because it would be more fun for me. And then do a radical cystectomy. During that, they also remove your prostate gland and then dig around for any lymph nodes they can find as well. And we agreed to that. Now there's a couple different ways they can redo your bladder with this surgery. There's an ileoconduit, which is what I did, which is where they actually remove part of your small bowel and hook it to your ureters and then push it out inside of your abdomen and make a stoma that you wear, your wafer in your bag. And the other one is a neobladder, which the doctor said because of my size, I'd probably always leak at night, might leak during the day. You basically have to train yourself how to go to the bathroom again. And I'm not the most patient person with myself. So I didn't think that would work well for me. So I chose the ileal conduit. I was the second surgery of the day. I think I went in around 11:30 or so. It was dark when I woke up. I think the surgery was about 4 hours, and not really sure how long I was in recovery, but I woke up, my wife was beside me, and life was good.
Oh, wow. So now, wow. I mean, and that's just, I mean, that's a lot. And that's what you've been through in less than 2 years.
Yes.
So you have this diagnosis and they talk about the survival rate. Now, is that if you did nothing and you didn't take your bladder out, or is that, what happened?
No, it was 50% if I did the radiation chemo and had because the small cell was fully engulfed in the muscle.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think it had spread outside of the bladder yet.
Okay.
So they said, really, your best option is to remove it.
Mm-hmm.
We can't really save it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was 50% at 5 years. And later the doctor told us, which is probably good, he did wait.
Mm-hmm.
The national average, national studies was 50%. But he said in his practice, what he finds is survivability is really 36% at 5 years.
Wow.
If you'd have told me 36, I probably still would have done it, but I probably would have been more hesitant. And I know it's only 14%, but it sounds a lot worse.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. And that's wow. Now you wake up, now you research things. So you were smart. So there's a few things that you did that I think a lot of people can, one, sorry for everything that you've gone through. It's a lot. But you did a lot of things. You understand, right? A lot of people wouldn't have the wherewithal to understand what all this means, but you did your research, you read your papers, and you referred yourself to a specialist. And like you said, most people don't know that they can do that. And I think that was, something that a lot of people can take away from this, but also just your tenacity, right? You're like, something's wrong. You knew something wasn't right in your body, and asking questions. Asking questions, I think, is so important. And you were asking the questions, like to that one doctor, what is that? Like, that doesn't look right. And he said, it's just scar tissue. And you're like, still doesn't look right.
Yeah. And getting a second opinion is really hard, because I talked to a couple physician friends of mine, and they highly recommended that I would do that. But when you go to look at your doctor going, I'm going to get a second opinion, they kind of look at you like, after all I've done, you almost feel like a traitor.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd still highly recommend it. Even if the other doctor says exactly word for word the same thing, then you, at least in your mind, can feel that you've made the most educated decision you can make.
Right.
And that's what you want to do. And
right.
Google's a wonderful thing, but if you're going to do searches, you want to do not hearsay searches. You want to go to good sound websites that are going to give you good medical information, and so that you can read it. And if nothing else, print it off and take it in with you with the doctor and go, what's this conclusion of this study mean for me?
Mm-hmm.
And he might say it doesn't really apply to you, but on the other hand, might just explain it to you so you can go, oh, okay, I like that result. That's favorable.
Right. And you're saying things that are so important, asking questions. And I think sometimes we just get so stuck, like when you find out there's something wrong, I don't know what's wrong, I don't understand it. It's, asking questions. And this can go for the listeners who, have cancer, or gone through cancer, or going through it now, or, or it's Crohn's and colitis and things like that. Like, something's wrong. And if we listen to our bodies are going to tell us something's wrong. And asking questions, and no question is a dumb question. You can ask any questions, because we're not in this. We're not doctors. We're not nutritionists. No. We don't understand how does the body work. We know enough. Some of us know enough. Yeah. So now April comes along. Your wife sounds amazing. I can't wait to meet her someday.
Is. Well, people would ask me, how are you getting through this? And I'd look at them and I'd go, Jesus has got my right hand and my wife's got my left hand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And I still mean it today. And I said it before surgery, and I'll still say it today. Those two had my hands, and they both took great care of me.
Yeah, they did. Oh, that just made me tear up. Because I know the feeling. I know that feeling so well. And sometimes you were blessed with that. So yeah, so they've had you. So now you have your ostomy. You're a big burly dude.
I am.
How are you feeling about it?
Well, I'm getting closer to it's a beautiful bag mindset. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting closer.
You're still a baby with it.
You're still a baby.
Time.
We went to my post-op, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it was, post-surgical. And my surgeon sat us down and he looked at us and he said, I can count on one hand the number of people I've told this to. And I'm like, oh Lord, now what? I've had 5, 6 surgeries here. I've done chemo, I've done radiation. I'm trying to live with an osteum, and right now I don't have any good words for it because I'm very frustrated with it. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm changing your survivability to 90% at 5 years. And we were both kind of dumbfounded, but we had people all across the United States praying for us. Mm-hmm. Whether you believe in God or not, we had a miracle.
You did.
To go from 36% to 90%. That doesn't normally happen. And he said, I can count it on the number on my one hand how many people I've given this diagnosis to. So we're learning. I found that's the one thing I would, if anybody that's new to this fun world of osteum, is you have to find the wafer system that works for you. Mm-hmm. Not what everybody else says you should try, but what works for you. And I think I found one that works for me. So we haven't had any leaks or anything like that for a couple weeks, so that helps immensely. When you wake up at night and your sheets are wet, it just, it's like, really?
Right. I've had those conversations, and I woke up in a hotel in Italy just a few months ago, and I had the wrong wafer on. I had packed a couple of the wrong wafers, and I didn't realize I had some of my great ones in the other bag. So I was like, oh, I packed the wrong one. So I put it on, and I ended up leaking through it in a hotel, and it wasn't urine, it was poop, just kind of all over. And I'm like, that's on my legs. I was like, oh, why?
Yeah. You have to find the system that works for you. Mm-hmm. Changing a urostomy is kind of like probably changing an ileostomy. You want to be as quick as you can with it, because otherwise, you never know when the volcano is going to erupt, is how I like to put it. Mm-hmm. And, you get yourself all cleaned up and dry and ready to put it on, and then all over the place. And you're like, really? Come on. You couldn't have waited 3 more seconds? I was almost done.
Right? And you talk to it. It's like your stoma. That's why a lot of people name their stomas. I don't know if you've named yours yet, or if you want to. But
not yet.
Okay.
As Steve Harvey says, we're going to keep it dignified. So I'm not quite to the point where I should probably name it.
Right? Because who knows what you would want to name it? I've called it names.
And afterwards, I did have buyer's remorse after my surgery, because I just was not patient with myself, and still aren't most days. I'm like, this isn't hard. This, we put this on, it should work. We shouldn't have leaks. We shouldn't do this. And you're just going to have to set in your mindset that you're going to have leaks, and things aren't going to go the way you want. And it just takes time and patience, I think.
And
But for the
again, you're
first
a
month,
baby.
first month, I would have loved to record myself walking through the house, telling myself I should have kept my bladder. What was I thinking? You know, most people would have thought I was crazy, but we're starting to get past it. And then I have an appointment on Thursday for my routine follow-up. We're going to go
Okay.
talk to the doctors. Well, we have CTs and chest X-rays, and you know all the usual fun things you have at your follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been having kidney infections. I've had one every month since my surgery, and I'm hoping there's a simple solution. I'm sure another surgery is not out of the question for a revision, but somehow I keep having kidney infections, so we have to figure that out. That'll be the big question of the day, and hopefully it's a simple answer, but you never know. And I've tried to find some answers online and why this happens, and really haven't found a whole lot. So kind of interested to hear what the doctor says.
Right. And you will have, and you're the type, you're going to ask the questions, which is great. And you have, we're going to be praying for you the entire, I know all the listeners will be sending prayers as well, that you have a great visit on Thursday. You've been through a lot.
Yeah. The other thing I would point out is if two things. Take a notebook, write down your questions. Because if you're like me, when you go in there, the doctor will go, "You have any questions?" And you'd be like, "Nope, can't think of a thing." And that's how I am. So I write them all down. Sometimes my wife writes answers. Sometimes I do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is be your own advocate. Take a family member with you, because what you hear and what they hear are going to be totally different. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to take somebody with you when you're talking, these kind of big discussions are going on, because your brain's going to hear cancer and it's going to go off on a tangent and quit listening. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure where mine went, but it went somewhere. And so take somebody else with you, and take a notebook and write things down. It's interesting to go back and read a year and a half ago when this started, because I made notes after every doctor's appointment, you know, what the doctor said, what I felt. So I was flipping back through it today, looking at stuff, and I was like, oh, kind of forgot about that. Or, oh, I forgot about, you know, it's just really nice to have a review. And we had talked earlier when we were talking, listen to your own body. Most of the time I know I'm getting a kidney infection before there's any outward symptoms. So if you feel like you're getting sick or there's something wrong, listen to it. You know, don't always doubt yourself. It's easy to doubt yourself going, you know, I'm crazy, or I'm just imagining things, but listen to your body.
Yeah, our body tells us everything. I say that a lot. Our body knows, and we know if we just get quiet enough and listen, we know. And then the sooner you do something about it, the better you are. Dave, your story is amazing. Again, I can't thank you enough for reaching out to me. Your story is going to change a lot of people's lives. And, you know, if there's anything the community can do for you, because there is a very large community in ostomies. And I know you're not on social media.
No,
and that's okay. We talked about that, right? It's like, does it bring you up? Does it bring you down? And sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's not. I know I find a lot of people that I've connected with in the ostomy world on Instagram. But again, you know, we're here. If there was something, you know, you've left us so much, you've given us so much on our call today. If there was one thing that the one last thing that you wanted to leave the listeners with, what would that be?
I can't believe I am saying this because this is not me at all. And I think I put this in our original email. Find community. I love your podcast. I listen to them. I can relate a lot. Even though it's different body systems, it's helpful to know that other people have issues with wafers. You're not the first. And it's helpful to know, a lot of the nutrition and diet. Because if you've had a urostomy, you've had a GI surgery as well, because they've taken part of your small bowel to make connections. So, your digestive health is just as important, to make sure things are flowing through there like they're supposed to. I did try to go to it's not really close to a local group, but I got caught in a traffic snafu, and it took me 4 hours to go about 30 miles.
Oh no.
So I missed the first meeting, but they say they have a Zoom meeting. So I need to email and get the Zoom information so I can attend the next meeting, maybe a little easier. But find a community, whether it's a podcast community or a local community. Find, because osteum nurses are great. Most osteum nurses don't have an osteum. And if you can become friends with a couple people that have them, when you have these going, hey, have you ever had this happen? And they can go, oh yeah, just do this. It can make life a lot easier. You can feel like, you're not the only one out there with bizarre body problems. So, and that's what I've loved about your podcast is people just explaining their story and how they got through it. And, I've worn a bracelet at the beginning of this. I passed them out to a lot of my family members, and it says never quit. And I can't tell you how many times I've looked down at it and went, oh yeah, I can't quit. Because there's been a lot of times I wanted to quit, especially during chemo. I'm like, why am I doing this? I feel perfectly good until I walk in here and they fill me full of chemicals. Why am I doing this? And it's a great little reminder. I've got one, my kids have one, my wife has one, and whatever it takes to keep you motivated, that's what you need. Exactly. If it's pictures of your kids or picture of your grandkids or whatever, put them up. Don't worry about it.
Because there's an outside reason why you're doing this.
That's right.
And you're right. You got to keep yourself motivated, because it's easy to quit.
Yeah. It's easy to get in the dumps. It's easy to quit. So.
Yeah. But the beautiful thing is on the other side of that, if you don't quit, because look now, you went from 36% to 90%.
That's right.
And how beautiful is that?
That is.
Yeah.
And that's what I keep reminding myself when I look at my beautiful bag.
There you go. Oh, Dave, thank you again so much for being with us today. I really, truly, we all appreciate it. And we're going to send our prayers to you for Thursday.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor to be able to do this with you.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. If you enjoyed this podcast, get the behind the scenes at leannehayden.com/ostomy updates. And also, if you found this episode encouraging, please screenshot it and share it on Instagram. And don't forget to tag me and also the person who was on the episode with me. I occasionally will do special gifts for anyone who does do a screenshot and share it on Instagram or in your stories. Also, lastly, please go to Apple or Google, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast to keep up with them every single week. I enjoy you guys. Thank you so much for being here.